Hi everyone, welcome to our first episode of English Speaking Podcast. I'm Ethan.
And I'm Leslie. We're excited to share our English learning experiences with you.
This is an English Speaking Podcast, where we explore real-life topics to help you improve both your English speaking and your thinking. Today's topic is something everyone deals with: change. We'll be sharing personal stories, ideas, and advice on how to embrace change in life.
And at the end of our conversation, we'll also break down some of the useful and challenging vocabulary or phrases we used. So make sure to stick around for that.
Alright, let's jump in. Leslie, when you feel like something in your daily routine needs to change, how do you approach it?
Great question. I usually start small. If I'm changing my morning routine, I might just wake up 15 minutes earlier or switch the order of what I do. I try to keep the change manageable, so I don't get overwhelmed.
That's a smart way to do it. For me, I usually need some kind of wake-up call, a feeling of burnout or stagnation. Then I stop and ask myself, okay, what can I do differently today? But I'll be honest, I don't always see the results right away.
I can relate. Do you usually get the results you expected immediately?
Rarely. Honestly, change takes time to settle in. Sometimes the process is way slower than I imagined, and what I end up with isn't always what I expected. It's often better, but it comes through a bit of trial and error.
Care to elaborate a bit more?
Sure. I think a lot of us go into change thinking it'll be this clean, linear experience. But in reality, there are setbacks, adjustments, and moments of doubt. I've learned that patience is part of the process. You need to give yourself time to adapt and let the new routine or mindset take root.
That's a great point. And I think that's part of why change feels scary. It's unpredictable. But even if it's uncomfortable, it's also necessary, don't you think?
Definitely. It's scary because it pulls us out of the familiar. We're wired to seek comfort, so even if something's not working well, we might stick with it just because it's what we know. But growth never comes without some kind of shift.
Exactly. Which leads me to this. How do you train yourself to become more adaptable to change?
I think of it like a muscle. The more you stretch it, the more resilient you become. Personally, I do a lot of reflection, journaling, meditation, and talking things out with friends. That helps me process change rather than resist it.
That's great. I've found that staying curious helps me a lot. Instead of jumping straight to fear, I ask myself, what can I learn from this? It changes my perspective and helps me stay open.
Speaking of mindset, what motivates you to embrace those transitions instead of avoiding them?
For me, it's personal growth. I've realized that every meaningful improvement in my life came through a change I was once afraid of. So now I see change as a path, not a problem.
Well said. I'd add that sometimes, the motivation is external: a new job, a move, even a breakup. But how I respond to those situations shapes my internal motivation. I start asking, how can I grow from this?
It's great that you mentioned those external and internal motivations. Could you get into more detail about your points?
Sure. External motivation usually comes from outside forces, like deadlines, life events, or other people's expectations. It can kickstart action. But internal motivation is what sustains change over time. It's driven by personal values, goals, or even the desire to live more intentionally. When both align, the change feels more meaningful and doable.
That's really insightful. Let's get into something more practical. What are your top tips for managing change?
First off, don't try to change everything all at once. Break it down. Second, allow space for discomfort, it's natural. And don't be afraid to ask for help. Having a support system makes a big difference.
Totally agree. I'd also say, build small routines into the new situation. That gives you a sense of control. And remember to celebrate even small wins. They keep your momentum going.
That's a good one. Let's talk about something deeper now. How do you recognize growth opportunities in the middle of challenging changes?
I take a step back. Sometimes when you're right in the middle of a tough moment, it's hard to see clearly. But when I ask, what's this teaching me? Or how can I use this experience? It shifts me from being stuck to being curious.
Yes. Pain or discomfort can actually highlight exactly what needs to grow. The trick is to look at the bigger picture instead of just the problem.
And what about failure? How do you usually deal with it?
These days, I try to view failure as feedback. It's not always easy. I still get frustrated, but I remind myself that every failure carries a message. Maybe I missed a detail, or maybe it just wasn't the right time. Either way, I use it to adjust and try again.
Same here. I think separating the failure from your self-worth is crucial. One thing going wrong doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means something needs to change, and that's okay.
Do you ever time your transitions? Like, do you wait for a certain point in the year, like New Year's?
Sometimes, the new year, or even the start of a new season feels like a clean slate. But I've learned not to wait for the perfect time. If something needs to change, the best time is often now.
Totally agree. Waiting for January 1st can be a trap. It's not about the calendar, it's about momentum.
I'm curious, do you think technology plays a role in how we handle change?
Definitely. Tech makes change happen faster than ever. New tools, new platforms, new ways of working. It can feel overwhelming. But on the flip side, it also gives us more ways to learn, connect, and adapt.
Right. It's like we're constantly being challenged to evolve. But the resources are there: online learning, virtual communities, even AI tools.
Alright, let's jump into the vocabulary section. These are some of the key words and phrases we used during our chat, and we'll explain what they mean, and how you can use them in your own conversations.
Yep. We'll take turns, and sometimes we'll ask each other to explain the words we used in our own stories. Ethan, I think you kicked off the topic by talking about embracing change. Can you start us off?
Sure. Embracing change means accepting and welcoming change instead of fighting against it. It's more than just dealing with it, it's about leaning into it, even when it's uncomfortable. For example, when I switched careers, I had to embrace change and trust the process.
That's a great phrase for mindset shifts. Okay, Ethan, earlier I said I try not to feel too overwhelmed when I start changing my routine. Want to break that one down?
Absolutely. Overwhelmed means feeling like everything is too much to handle, like there's too much happening at once, and you can't cope. For example, she felt overwhelmed by all the new responsibilities at her job.
Yep, been there. Now, you mentioned burnout as one of the reasons you know it's time for a change. Can you explain what burnout means?
Of course. Burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and sometimes physical exhaustion caused by prolonged stress. For example, after months of working overtime, he started experiencing burnout.
That's an important one. I think right after that, you said stagnation also pushes you to change. What does that mean?
Good catch. Stagnation means a lack of progress or movement. It's when things feel stuck or motionless. For example, she felt like her career was in stagnation, so she signed up for a new course.
Love that example. I said earlier, I can relate. So let me explain relate. When you say you relate to something, it means you understand or identify with it based on your own experience. For instance, I can really relate to what he said about feeling lost after college.
Nice one. You also asked me to elaborate when I was talking about delayed results. Can you define that one too?
Sure. Elaborate means to give more detail or explanation about something. It's often used when someone wants a deeper understanding. Example: can you elaborate on your plan for next month's presentation?
Love that word. Now, I said change isn't a linear experience. That's a bit abstract. Want me to explain?
Yes, please.
So, a linear experience would mean something that moves forward in a straight, predictable line. But change isn't like that. It has ups, downs, and twists. So when we say change isn't linear, we mean it's unpredictable and not always smooth. Example: personal growth isn't a linear experience, it comes with setbacks.
Great explanation. Earlier, you also said we're wired for comfort. Can you explain wired in that context?
Sure. Wired means naturally or biologically programmed to behave a certain way. So if we say we're wired for comfort, we mean humans naturally prefer safety and familiarity. Example: we're wired to avoid risk, even if change could help us.
Right. I also talked about trying to be more adaptable. That means being able to adjust to new situations easily. Example: she's very adaptable. She adjusted quickly to working remotely.
And along with that, you said resilient. Want to define that too?
Yes. Resilient describes someone who can recover quickly from difficulties or setbacks. For instance, even after losing his job, he stayed resilient and kept applying for new opportunities.
Powerful word. I also said we sometimes resist change. That means to push against or try to avoid something. Example: he resisted the new system at work because he didn't understand it.
Then we got into motivation. You said internal and external things can motivate you to change. So, motivate means to inspire someone to take action or keep going. Example: her coach's support really motivated her to train harder.
I also mentioned that internal motivation helps sustain change. To sustain something means to keep it going or maintain it over time. Example: you need strong habits to sustain long-term change.
And finally, I brought up the phrase clean slate. That's a common expression. It means a fresh start, with no past mistakes or baggage. Example: moving to a new city felt like a clean slate.
Love that one. And I talked about momentum, which is the energy or drive that keeps you moving forward once you've started something. Example: once she started exercising every day, she gained momentum and stuck with it.
That wraps up our vocab session. We hope explaining these words helps you use them confidently in your own speaking or writing.
Absolutely. Revisit this part of the podcast if you need to review the meanings or hear the examples again.
Thanks for listening, and see you next time.